Hey y'all, it's Sarah, and let's look at what I've got going for September. I wanted to do something in the realm of fall, but we're not exactly in fall where I'm at. It's still really hot, but everything is turning brown, and that's mostly from the heat. So I was inspired by that, looking around at my own property, and this is what I came up with. I had a lot of fun with it. It's way simpler than you would guess, and I want to jump into it. As far as markers go for this particular one, I literally just kind of pull together about every kind of brown, tan, beige, what have you. I pulled lots of different colors together and one green. I did throw in a green there. But I pulled all these together and they all have different tips because the different tips are going to give you a little bit different result on each of your little pieces. But I want to go ahead and get started and jump into this. You do not have to do all the way across your page like I did, but if you see, I still gave some examples that even if you do go all the way across your page, and I should mention my page is the big, so it's 8.5 by 11, but you can always just lay it out where you'd like to have it. I still have room where I can weave things in, but I also don't have nearly as busy of a schedule as a lot of people might. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into this. The first thing I'm going to do will be to bring in a straight edge and go ahead and mark out my divided areas. So for me, that's meal planning. That's my little weather tab and a couple other things. And in order to do that, I do it with marker. You can do it with washi tape. But in my area, the washi tape always wants to peel on me. So I just do it with marker. I have gotten pretty comfortable with doing this freehand. If you're not comfortable doing this freehand, you can always try to tape it off with some washi tape. But generally, all I do is try to, I usually start with a chisel tip style marker or highlighter and try to keep one motion going. And you end up with a line that looks more like it was printed rather than a marker. And I'll just show you really quick and then I'll go in and do my others. So I'm just going to measure that out. I'm not putting a lot of pressure against the edge of my ruler for a couple reasons. One, you don't want to completely ruin your marker. I haven't had a lot of problem with that. I do this quite often, but I rotate out what colors I use, so I'm not doing really any damage to my marker. But if you push against your straight edge too hard, you're going to push ink underneath that, and you'll have more of a chance of bleeding. So I did a little bit of a wonky job with that. Let's hope I do better on this side. I'm standing up at a weird angle, so it makes it a little more difficult. Let's see if I can do better with this. Okay, that's a much better example. So you can see that line basically looks like it was printed on. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of those. You divide it out what works for you or what things you might want to break down onto your planner page. Now that I have the basic layout for what my typical page design is, I'm coming in now and I'm starting with, this is kind of a soft green color. And if you want just browns on yours, that's fine. But I wanted to add that little pop of green. And this part is really fun and it's really easy. And we're going to layer on top of this, which is why I'm using such a soft green. But for the most part, I just came in and I started flicking up in no particular order, no particular width. There's going to be so much filler on this that you don't have to get this perfect. Use this. This one is a really good one to do while you're watching something because it's kind of one of those ones you can do pretty idly. And I'm swooping different directions. I'm going to keep going, filling in spots. And I'm switching my pace back and forth so that none of them are actually just going straight up and down or that I'm getting them all at an identical angle. So I'm going to continue this all the way across. If you want to, a lot of times I recommend, if you're not a busy planner person on your weekends, this is a good place. You could absolutely get away with just doing it down these 3 columns. But I'm going to go ahead and continue all the way across the page with my green. So I wanted to pop in and show you. I was struggling with the green marker I was using. It was kind of scratching along, so I switched over to this one, which is a slightly different green, but I didn't want y'all to think I tricked you. I just had to switch to a little something else. That one was not letting me flick the lines without, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of giving me these scratchy marks here. It's a new marker and the ink is wonderful, but I don't think it's been, I don't think the ink is loaded down in it super well just yet. So I wanted to show you as I was doing this that I wasn't trying to trick you. I just had to switch. So we're going to adapt and adjust. I found it easier, honestly, to flip it upside down and flick downwards from that starting line just to make sure that I didn't go too far below that line with the green. And you can see I tried a couple of greens here before I found one I felt was light enough to layer over with these other colors, but it's fine. I think they're all within a good color range. My next step is I'm coming across here and I'm zigzagging up there. We're going to add some brown to that just to give it some dirt look here later, but I'm just kind of making some more artificial grass or ground here, and I'm just zigzagging it up and down. Something like that. So I ended up liking this color for this. Let's grab our pen, and for me, like usual, I'm just using a cheap dollar store ballpoint pen. This is the one I typically lean to, this dollar store, Dollar Tree Click Click pen. And I'm going to start in with a little bit of artificial grass here, even though we've got our pieces up there. And basically the same moves that I did, those scratchy kind of moves that I did right along this bottom, I'm doing the same thing. Not even trying to keep up with where there's pieces there. And I'm just dragging it along almost like a heart monitor. I'm not sure that's the technical art description, but that's what we're going with. And I'm not keeping the line continuous. I'm just, I'm being a little twitchy about it. And you can just see there's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm not keeping a pattern to it. Just being a little imaginative there, just going along. It kind of reminds me, when I do it this way, it kind of reminds me of doing grass when we were kids, when you draw it as a kid. So that's where I'm at so far. On a similar note, while I've got my pen handy, I'm going to go ahead and start flicking some lines upward. And by that, I'm going to start in with things like, I think it's cattails. You know, the corn dogs on a stick. I think they're cattails. So I'm going to make some of these really long and come up pretty high. I'm going to space out. And I don't know if you noticed with my sample, but for ones that I wanted to get really tall lines in, I went more towards right about here with my taller pieces. In a lot of aspects, I went more in between these areas with my taller pieces. That way there would still be some room kind of around here if I wanted to work in some squares or work in some writing or things like that. So think about that as you're just randomly throwing some lines up. And I'm not being super particular. Just a few here and there. I might throw some down here at this end. And even pop some out this way. So you can see this one's pretty wild. I'm going all over with it. You can start to do some smaller ones. We're going to fill in everywhere that we throw some lines in. So you can do some long ones. You can do some short ones. And some of them you may decide to intentionally put a few there. You might feel like there's some spots you want to fill into. I'm just giving myself a basic start, and I'll fill in as I see places that might need it as I go. That's why this one is fun. You can take it as an extreme as you want to, or you could do a much smaller. You could do this very same thing on a little bit smaller scale, so you have more room for writing if you need it. But I'm leaning them. They're curving, they're going over. You almost could do this part with your eyes closed. So I'll certainly be adding more to this. I can promise you as we go, I'll be adding more to this. But this gives me a good start to get an idea. So maybe you can see how quickly that part just came together. Let's talk about getting some things starting to fill in. So all my little brown markers. You're going to see me pull out all different kinds. Partially, I want to show that the tips for some make a difference, right? So the chisel tip is one that I think I'll start with first. And honestly, that one kind of leaned. I'm going to go that way. There we go. So I want to start with like a pampas grass kind of look. I want to make sure this one's light enough. This one may not be light enough. Let's see if I've got one a hair lighter. I'm actually doing my pampas grass in a lot of colors, so I don't know why I'm being super picky about it. But I started pretty simply. So wherever I wanted the lowest portion of my pampas grass to be, I just started using that chisel tip to my benefit and dragging it up. And I'll get a little closer so you can see. Okay, let's do that again. I'm using that chisel tip and dragging from the stem upwards. So none of my pampas grass is probably going to look the same as the other, and I'm cool with that. I'm actually wanting that, so I'm switching colors right beside this one. Well, I thought I was switching colors. These are pretty close. But same thing, I'm just scratching it up. Just like that. So simple, yet you definitely get the pampas grass idea. And let's see if I can actually find a color that looks slightly different than that, and I'll show you another one. So this one is one of the Crayola ones. This is just to show that you don't have to have the chisel tip. I just found it a little faster, a little easier to do. But I'll go this route. Hopefully this one will show up. This one's a pretty light one out of this Crayola collection. So basically the same method, and it is pretty pale. You guys are going to have a harder time seeing it, but it's pretty pale. And I just flicked it up, and look, I just drug that last little bit all the way up. Can you see that? So it looks almost feathered out up there. I might do another one that same way here. And we've got some pampas grass. That's a pretty good start. Let's talk about the cattails or whatever these things are. I feel like that's the name, but something keeps telling my brain that I'm getting it wrong. So I think for this one, I'm bringing in this crazy art one, because I feel like this, if I remember correctly, this crazy art one is a brown with a little bit of red undertone to it instead of a grayer or more brown undertone. It's got a little bit of red to it. And I'm just going to start at the tip of one of these and try to bring it up like that. So let's do that in a couple places here. I'm trying to push it as wide as I can make this come out. So there we go. My corn dog plants are starting to look like something. And I'll do a few on this end to balance that other end. I might do some this way. That was a little more of a challenge because I went over my hole punched area. So there's 2 plants right there already. Let's talk about some others and how simple you can do pretty much all kinds of things. I'm just reaching back and forth to different markers for different colors. You really don't need as many as I'm using. I'm just trying to kind of see what neutrals each one of these really play out to be. I gotta tell you, this one is supposed to be scented. It is called Fluffer Nutter Sandwich. So I think it's supposed to be peanut butter. I'm not getting peanut butter out of that. I'm not sure what that smells like. I'm not thinking peanut butter though. So for some of these lower plants, you can take this a lot of ways. I'm going to use this one and start maybe at the bottom of one of these. And I'm just going to take a little V shape on one of these and then top it like that. So let's repeat that. This one's actually a really, this is a much softer brown than I thought it would be. It does kind of give me the peanut butter color vibe, so I guess that was a good name for it. And I'm going to do the same thing here, but you're going to get a slightly different looking plant. So each time I do this, I'm going to make that V shape a little smaller. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of difference when you keep the leaves even sized and versus making them a little smaller. So let's grab another brown color and let's see what other plants we can throw out. I'm going to go back with a chisel tip because I want to show some different leaf styles and share some of that. So I'm going to take this chisel tip here, and it's going to be kind of similar to what we were just doing there, but you're going to get a little bit different look because it has this squared off chisel tip. Instead of going fully as a V, because I want these leaves a little more defined, I'm going to go down each side instead. So I'm going to drag that down with that chisel point. Maybe you saw that. I'm going to drag that down to the stem with that chisel point. And I might make it a little smaller as I go up. Now when I get to this top point, I'm going to drag it on an angle. So it gave me a little something different on the leaf. And I will spin my paper all different directions to get something. And I'm trying to do it the same way here, but I'm dragging upwards instead of down. So I'm getting a slightly different leaf. And partially it works for this one because if you notice, my plant's leaning a little. It's kind of leaning sideways a little. I feel like you'd see a different viewpoint on those leaves slightly. So now we've got another plant or another type of plant going on. Let's talk about going on a smaller scale. So I'm taking a really small, this is a Dollar Tree. I think it came out of a 10-pack, but it's got a really small tip. And if you have double-ended markers and stuff, you probably have a smaller tip on one of those. So I'm going to take this one and let me find, I want a pretty tall stalk. I don't see one that I want to use, so I'm just going to make one. There we go. We're going to basically do the same thing, but since this line is much thinner, you're going to get a very different look, and we'll be able to get these a little closer together. And you can take them smaller as you go. So that gives us another plant type. And when you switch out the colors, anytime you switch out the colors, it's going to make that same method just look like a different plant as well. So let's bring in another one of Another one of my fat ones. Wait, I used this one already, didn't I? This gave me a really good excuse to just play with a lot of my browns and compare them. So another idea is to almost do like, kind of like a heart, but not exactly a heart. So I'm going to loop, instead of just a V line, I'm looping kind of like you would a heart, but it's like a wide flat heart. So that almost gives, I'd say, a little similar to maybe a eucalyptus style leaf. A little fatter, a little rounder. And one other type, or a couple other types of plants. So I threw a couple of lines up and then gave them branches. And you can give them as many branches as you want to. I gave them a few branches. And then I'm going to pull in a marker and just put some dots there. So we've got some of that going on. You could put more dots than that if you wanted to and really fill that in. I'll do that on a smaller one. Let me throw in, I don't make the side feel neglected, so I'll come in and do that side. And I'm just taking this little bitty one again because it's easy to use on these smaller branches. And just dotting down it. My little dots aren't even touching these branches, if you notice. So you can throw a few of those in there. And basically, for the most part of this, I've just repeated the same concepts at a different size, scale, and color scheme. I've switched the colors up a little bit. I even threw a few flowers in. So nothing major, but I'm going to do it with yellow. I didn't get too wild and crazy with my flowers, but I did put some flowers in, and all I did for those literally was almost scratch them on like a heart. And I know that's a pale yellow, but they're almost like a long heart, like the long primitive style hearts. So you can do them in varying heights. And all I did for those, and I might have to get a little closer, I just came right at that base of that heart, did like a tiny black V there, or almost like a little, another little heart. And it gave me something like a small flower, and you can mix those in as well. I'm not going to sit and show every flower being filled in or every type of greenery that I've shared be filled in because they're all repetitive. So before I get too far into getting all my plants added, I want to do a couple other things. I want to fill some of this, and I'm just going to flick some shorter lines now. Some of those may get turned into plants, and some of them may just be little strands of grass coming up. But I want it a little bit fuller looking. And I'm just going in, kind of flicking in between some of my longer lines that I did intend on turning into different plants. I'm mostly starting pretty much at that line where my little jaggedy heartbeat grass areas were. You can do as much of this as you want to. Okay, I think most of those areas, oh, maybe over here a little, maybe a few in this spot. And when I say I'm flicking, so I'm starting with a little bit heavier pressure, my starting point, and then I lift up off the pressure as I come up. So anytime I'm saying I'm flicking it, it's basically that kind of motion with my pens or my markers, just so I can get the line to fade out as I go up. So that gave me a little more texture down through there. My next step is probably going to go ahead and put in maybe some dirt. I think I want to put a little dirt in, so let me find a color for my dirt. And I feel like I'm just going to use this one. This seems like it might be an easy one to use. Just a brown color. And to make this a little easier for me, because of the way that I did the areas below that, I think I'm bringing in my straight edge here just to kind of keep me within that grid line. And I'm just going to pull across here. And I'll do it on the other side. Then I'm going to add a little more to it. I just didn't want to come below that grid line. I'm going to come up in some spaces up here. I'm going to maybe do some lumpiness. I feel like this brown, I could have used a little bit darker brown. And I might do some little lumpy spots, throw in some little spots in there and some places where I might have some room. And I'm going to make those look like little piles of dirt, or try to. So I just did like a little lump there, maybe a few dots into it. A few little squiggles around there. I might, any place that I have a spot where I can squeeze in some kind of little wavy line that looks like a lump of dirt, I'll go ahead and do a little of that. Wherever you find you might have left yourself space. And I am jumping around with things once again because we're throwing a lot of color on top of all these things. So I feel like with all the layering in this area, I'd like to give it a little chance to dry. These are some pretty soft neutral colors for the most part, other than this really deep brown here. Most of my colors are pretty soft and neutral, and I think they should be okay. And they look like they are. But just to be on the safe side, especially if you're trying to do this quickly, you know, you might want to bounce around a little bit too. So a little of that. I might even get as bold as adding some rocks. So let me see if I've got a space where I can add some rocks. It looks like right down in here I might have a little room. I'll get closer. So to do the rock, I don't have any real specific instruction here, other than I'm going to go down a little jaggedy, real similar to what I just did with my dirt piles, but I might draw a straight jagged line down the center. Don't worry if you're doing it over your grass area. And then I throw a few lines down in there, and that's okay because when I go to do the gray over that, it will not be noticeable, not a problem. And let's see, is there another spot I can fit one of these guys? I'm just going to try to work it over stuff I've already got there because the grass can be growing in front of the rock, behind the rock. I think you'll be fine. Let's see. I'll throw another rock right over here as well. And I'm doing the same thing, but a little larger. As you can see, I basically did the same thing, but I did it a little larger. And come down with a line or two that are a little more on the straight side, and then flicked a little down those. And so you can see a little better version of that, I'm going to take some washi tape and tape the back side of this together so that I can maybe do a little something here in the seam area. So you can see I just took some cheap dollar store washi tape, and I'm going to try the very same thing as far as a rock goes in this space, and see if I can get a larger rock maybe. A little something like that, starting that way. And I hadn't even really given it a bottom yet. I think I'm going to start up here, do a little something across here, and I might come down with a few lines this way. Maybe a few upwards. I think the bottom of our rock is coming down into these, so I won't be able to put a full bottom on there, but it fills that space some. You might even want to put some plants through here, but since mine are overlapping like they are, I think maybe I might throw another plant or two there, but I don't think it needs much. Now to do this rock, I'm going to grab a light color gray. This one is a brush marker. It's one of my favorite ones as far as grays go, and I'm trying to get it to focus for you. It is found at Pop Shelf. This one is individually, and I love this one because it is such a good soft neutral gray. A lot of times grays end up really, really dark. So for now, I've just colored that in, and you can see it's a very soft neutral gray. Now these other guys, I'm probably going to have to go with, I don't know, we'll see. Nope, definitely going to have to go with a darker gray on these rocks just because got them overlapped into this grass area. So I'm just going to find something slightly darker in the gray range. I'm not sure if this one's even going to be dark enough, but we'll see. I'm just using a gray highlighter. Nope, this one's not. So we're figuring this out together. I knew the first time that I tried it, I had to do a lighter and a darker between my different rocks. So that one worked. That one showed up. And I might even, since I have this one in my hand, right around over here, this end point, just going to use that same basic shape concept right there. And made me another rock down here at this end. So I've got a couple rocks in there. While I've got this darker one, I might even go ahead and use it and come in some of the places where I did that, those little lines. I might throw a little of that darker shade in there just to shadow on that rock some, or shade on that rock some. So you can throw as many of those in there as you want to. But another thing that I did do, I want to share this, that same light color gray, that same really light gray, I went in and I started flicking kind of behind the scenes there. Just a little. This was such a beautifully soft gray to do this with. So into my grass. Doing this also tones down the brightness of that green, and you're going to see me do it again in a second on these yellow flowers to kind of mute them down some. Be careful doing something like this though. As you're going over some of these, if you do it too quickly after you've done these other colors, you're liable to have it bleed some of your colors. So I did that, and I basically did the same thing with a beige color, throwing it up behind those scenes as well. Just flicking it in there also, like there was some brown sprigs flying up through there. And you can see I'm not being super particular about getting it. It's just another layer of color in that kind of greenery background. So while I have this one, I want to go ahead and do this thing. And I don't know, this one might, oh no, this one might be dark enough. So this is the light golden Crayola one. I'm coming down all under here. And if you can see, because this is the chunky one, I am tilting it as far over to its side as I can to get the width of that to come down. Now, for me, this is coming down into these other squares. However, this is such a pale color that you can absolutely write over this. Now, if you notice, I'm layering over it a little bit so it's darker and it's lighter in some spots. And I really felt like that gave it some dirt-like feeling. There's some white spots still in there. Now that I've got that applied, I'm just going to come back in really quick and we're just going to jot some lines in. And there is really, you take this as far as you want to do it. You throw a few dots in, some squiggles. So basically, there's a little texture to my ground. Just doing a little bit of like jerky motion when I do this, just kind of jerking it horizontally. I'm gonna go ahead and take this tape off of here. And now I've got like a little bit of dirt going on. I could take that a step further. Let's see, that was the light golden. I try to find a shade a hair darker. And some of these spots here where I did those lines, I could throw a little more color on it. You don't have to have a whole different color. You can just wait for this to dry and come back in with your same beigey color that you just applied there and layer over it again. And usually that lets it get dark enough. It'll take it down a shade or two more, if you can see from this side. So we're starting to feel like there's something going on there. Obviously, I'm going to fill mine in more, but let me jump back to this now. Here's my gray. My yellow here is a little bold. So I'm taking this light gray and going over it just a hair. And really just down one side. So it almost makes it look like there's multiple petals on this little heart-shaped yellow flower. And from y'all's perspective through the video, you may not see that and it might not be too noticeable to you. But from my perspective, where I'm seeing it, you can definitely tell now there's a little layer to that flower. Let's see if I can scoot you real close. Maybe you can see that. I thought it gave it a little something other than just having that flat heart-shaped flower there. So at this point, I'm bringing my brown marker in, again, the one I used for my dirt. And hitting a few spots there for my muddy dirt, just making those a little darker in a few places. Nowhere in particular, I'm just doing it in a few spots across there. And you can kind of see that adds a little bit more depth to that. So now it's getting exciting. We're starting to see this field of dry flowers. One of the things I did do is I get excited about these all the time. This is Dollar Tree, has this. It says it's a metallic marker, the rest of the series and all the other colors really do show in shimmer metallic. The white one doesn't. It is not a super strong white. You can kind of see that. It will almost soak into the color that you're using on. So I'm just going to go through down one edge of my little corn dogs, and I'm just flicking a little line down one side of that. And honestly, it's not even that necessary. When you're looking at it, you still get that that's what those plants are supposed to be, but I have the markers. I like any excuse to use them. So I'm going to go ahead and finish in a few more details of the actual smaller plants. These little bits, I'm just going to add more of them in, like you saw in my example. No. I got one more thing I want to show you because I really like this one and it's pretty easy to do. So let me find a spot where I can throw a few in. So I think maybe I'll try to work some right here. So just throw a couple of those lines in. I'm going to grab some kind of tan color, some kind of beigey. This one's actually a crazy art one, so it's not labeled what color it is. I'm going to do it very similar to how I did my corn dog plants. And yes, my artwork is all overlapping. It's fine. I need to bring this line up a little all the way to the end for me because I feel like that makes it easier for me to line up. So if you can see that, I just did a fat line down the end of that. I'm going to come up where that ends. And I just did a bunch of kind of squigglies and let them get smaller. Little bumps. And I let them get smaller as I got to the top. So maybe you can see that. This one was a fun one. And once you get to that point, the top couple areas right here, like maybe the top couple of those bumps, you're just going to flick out a couple of lines. Depends on how full you want those to look. And we've got like some little tiny weeds as well. And look, I can try it in a whole different color and it still works. I'm not sure what color this comes out as. It looks kind of brown of some sort. It's a sort of, this one's pretty pale. So I'm not sure how well you can see that, but literally you do not have to get this perfect because it works out. So I've got a few of those. I'm probably going to add those to both sides, but I did want to throw that one in there because I thought that one was pretty cute and it's relatively simple to do as well. So I'm going to go ahead, finish in some of this part, and then we'll pop back and maybe I'll get a chance to show you, let me pull this over real quick. Get a chance to do this hopefully, which is really a repeat of a lot of the same florals here, popped in a bucket, and that one really wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, or really, I'm going to be honest with you, using this grid pattern that I have here, this dot grid, it made it so much easier than when I try to do it on just plain white paper. So this one should be a breeze. Hopefully we'll get a chance to jump into it, but I'm going to finish my greenery. I might go ahead and already toss in some of my squares by the time I pop back with you guys, just so that I can share a little bit more finished look. Okie dokie, guys, I'm back. I am at this point. I have taken the time, gone through with some of these little cheap stencil squares and popped some things in. I just wanted to show a couple little tips. I've mentioned this before, but I always like pointing this out. So I draw my squares on rather than using stickers. The cool thing about doing that is I can pretty much fit them around anything else on my page because I'm drawing them in. But the other thing that I usually do is I try to take something marker-wise that coordinates, and this one's close enough. I think this is some kind of dark brown. We're about to find out together. And I'm just going to get a straight edge at the top of my square. And I'm actually going to use a couple different tones. I'm just grabbing a couple chisel tips. And I hope I started back where I was supposed to. I stopped for a minute and made sure that I got dinner ready for the family. So if I am off the mark on where I was supposed to start back, we're just going to pretend I wasn't. So that one's actually a lot darker than I would expect from that. I like it anyway, though. I like the neutral tones. Everything around me looks that way right now, except it's not actually fall. It's just we are so hot and dry these days. We did get some rain. I'm happy about that. So I'm just rotating out what colors I'm going to use. Right here on my little drop down squares, just pop a little color in there. And these two, pop a little color along the top of those. These just remind me a lot of file folder labels. Do you know what I'm talking about? The office type file folder labels that are color coded. It's kind of like doing that. One of the other things I like to do when I do these little squares, and this is simple enough, you could take it all the way down the sides and things like that, but I kind of just cheat. I get a straight edge, and a lot of times I don't even take a straight edge. I just try to freehand it, but I'm taking this light gray again and going, I'm starting a hair over on this square, and I'm stopping a hair before the end. And I'm not sure how well you guys can see this light gray, but it definitely gives a little sticker kind of dimension to some of these squares, so it didn't just look like I drew a square on my paper. And those might be too close for me to do both of them, but I can still do the lower one. And it's very subtle. I'm not sure, but it's, maybe you can see with that being such a light gray. It's super subtle, but visually, you're not even really noticing it when you look at the page, but you notice it. If that makes sense, you kind of notice it, but you don't. And it just takes a split second usually to go through and mark all those. And I'll even do that down here at the bottom with my little squares that I put for where I put my meal plan. Instead of doing it just the one straight line, since these are a much smaller square, I do like a backwards L the same way though. I don't start all the way over to this tip and I don't end all the way at that tip. I come over just a hair and I end just a hair before the corners. And it gives those squares a very subtle drop shadow. And a lot of times I'll use one of my Crayola super tip markers because that tip's a little easier to control than this brush tip. But like I said, you can barely see it. It's very subtle. Now let's talk about my bucket. So I think, let me look and see what my sample was. That's roughly about this size-ish. You don't have to have a stencil to do this. I'm just giving myself a little bit of a rough outline. And for the most part, you very seldom see me pencil anything in. I'm going to do it on this just to kind of show how to get that tapered side. So this is just something of a rectangle. I'm not even sure what size this rectangle is. If you have something that halfway fits in this area, so this looks like it may be like 1 1/4 by about 1 1/2-ish. So what I'm doing is where that rectangle was, I'm going to taper in just a hair. So if you can see, I've got my straight edge now at an angle. So I'm starting at that furthest corner and I'm going to bring it down to right about here. And I'll do the same thing to this other side. I'm going to bring the top one to that furthest corner. And I'm just going to taper it in a little bit. This one's going to probably be a little taller and skinnier than maybe my other one. I'm going to erase this one line here. And I'm going to try to be brave. I'm going to come straight in with a marker. So I think I'll grab this marker. And I'm going to hope for the best because I'm not looking at swatches right now to tell me which markers I should be using. I'm just going to hope for the best here. So I think these two might be lighter and darker than each other. We're going to try it. If I mess up in front of you, that means you don't have to mess up for yourself. When I did this, I'm sure there's some probably better ways to make metal or to give it that metal appearance. But for the most part, I pretty much tried to drag my lines down that way. I feel like I want a rim to this bucket, so I'm about to wing that too. Y'all wish me the best. Oh, that wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad. And we'll do the same thing up here. If it's not perfect, I think it's okay. This is a pretty rustic look. I think you can get away with a little rustic kind of primitive look here. So I want to go ahead, whoops. I want to go ahead and use this lighter gray and throw some of that in there, down that center. And then I'm going to give that a second to rest while I start adding some other details. And then I'll try to blend those grays together a little bit more. So for my handle, I did cheat a little bit. And I'm just going to try to find something circular that I can trace, outline. Just give me some kind of circular guidance. And that's going to make the handle of my bucket. So I'm going to come down about 1 notch-ish from wherever the top edge of my little bucket is. Like, I've got this grid area that kind of guides me. I know not everyone uses this particular planner, but somewhere about this far down. I'm going to say we're playing about 1/4 inch down. And try to find a circle that will match whatever your bucket width is right about there. So I'm comparing these two circles, and it looks like this larger one is going to be the one that fits the best for me. And just coming in with my pen, I go ahead and find my spot. While I'm doing that, I think I can go ahead and do this part. So just to give it a little extra detail here, I'm going to draw a backwards letter C right about here. Something close to it. And then kind of a tall, skinny letter C here. Oh, excuse me, my pen is trying to be difficult. Got it to work. I think I'm going to go ahead and outline all the parts of my little metal bucket here that I did with pencil. That's the one thing that I do love about using these ballpoint pens, is that whether I do it before or use it to line things afterwards, this ink very seldom ever smears on me with this one. Now, I did show a couple times where I tried to do it with other ballpoint pens, and I had it smear the minute that the marker hit it. So far, I've had great luck with this super cheap pen. So without thinking, I went ahead and jumped and finished outlining everything. I think I'm going to add another little kind of squiggly dot right there in my little letter C parts of these handles. And I'm going to go ahead and try to add a little bit more gray to this. I'm just going to come back down those sides again. This goes back to how I've mentioned before, as long as you let that marker rest and let it dry really well, the more you layer on that, the more you can get lots of color tone on there with just using your same marker. So I've come down this time, and this one looks like it's about to die. I think this one's about to die. I don't toss my markers, though, in certain colors when they start to dry out. So my grays, browns, and blacks, I never toss them as they're starting to dry out because I use them for other purposes. And I've got a couple videos that share why I still use them when they're at that more dry stage. Maybe not for something like this, but in other instances where I'm trying to blend some things out, like maybe if I hadn't had such dark rocks right here, I could have used that to help blend the different grays together. So I don't tend to throw these out. I'm going to put that one to the side and grab another one, and it may not even be the same tone. Let's go ahead and go with the light gray that I was using, and I can try to blend those out. So I came down with those straight lines, and then at that bottom area, I curved a little bit. Did like a letter U. And I just kind of left the center more on the light side. And I'll still probably go down this edge one more time, but I don't want to overly saturate it. So let's go ahead and jump into getting the bucket filled with some pretties. And I'm just going to do pretty much the same thing that I did here. We're just going to start flicking some things up. But when I do that, I want to consider how you would do a flower arrangement. So as I flick up, I'm going to keep an idea of the shape that I want to come up here. If you don't want it as tall as what I'm doing, if you need this written space for something, you might not want to go as tall as I'm going. But I'm going to start maybe here in the middle. And then basically fan out some of this. And I guess my pen is really starting to struggle. I brag on these a lot, but guys, you don't understand the abuse I put these pens through by the time you start seeing them drag out like this. Just know when you see one of my pens start to struggle, it's because I've put it through its rigors. I have drug it around. I have drawn all kinds of things with it. I've practiced all kinds of things with it. So I'm getting something like that. That's what I'm basically going to start with, but you can take this as elaborate as you want to, or maybe a little more basic. You can make it look a little softer, maybe less full if you need the room to add your writing or your list or things like that. But I'm going this route with it. And I'm trying to remember what colors I did some of these pampas grass with. I'm going to start with some pampas grass right up that center, since I know that's kind of my biggest stem, or the biggest stem that I'm going to end up using. So I'll use a little pampas grass, and I think I'll just do the one pampas grass, and then I'm going to fill in with all the other little ideas here. So I'm doing the pampas grass. I'm just grabbing a bunch of different markers like I did with different tips and throwing some shapes in. I did try a little bit to think of it in the same way that you would a floral arrangement. So, whatever I did to one side, I somewhat tried to balance it to the other, but that really is up to you. This is just giving you the ideas of things to work with or how to use some of the things that I've shown you on the other pieces. Let's try our little, let's do some of our corn dog plants. Might throw a few of those in there. And I might do some of the wheat or the wheat look-alike. So I might throw that in there. And this just gives me a start. You can always fill in more. And I did, if you look at my example, and I'll show you that in a minute. It goes back to take it as full and elaborate as you want to. You could add some of the shorter stems. I might add some shorter stems for some things. I'll also just kind of throw some just color in there, some stemware color in there, or some stem color in there, and filled in around it. So you saw that was simple enough, just flicking that upwards. Bring in some darker colors maybe, or let's find some mid-tone colors. I think some mid colors here would be nice. So I'm using that V-shaped kind of method again, and this time I'm doing it with that chunky tip, so it gives me a much wider version. Let's see, I think I want something up through there. Now, I do feel, and I can feel it, and I don't know if any of you have gotten to that point where you can feel where your paper is starting to get some weak spots, where it might be overly saturated. I'm going to flip this over and see what it did. And I just barely, that's exactly where I felt it. I don't know if you can see, there's a hair of ghosting literally right there. And I felt it when it hit, and you probably can too. So that's something to look for as you're doing these things. If you're worried about whether or not you're bleeding through or not, you can start to feel when it hits the paper. You can start to tell when the integrity of the paper is breaking down, when it's overly saturated, and you might want to back off and give it more time. I could have really, if I was not trying to do this on a video, I do a few things here. I move around. I do something else. I start filling in things. I might actually start filling in things here. And that allows me to do a little more without any risk of that saturation and those kind of things. But you'll start to feel it. You'll start to really learn your paper. And every paper is going to be different. But with the Happy Planner paper, I really have gotten to a point where I can absolutely tell when something is not hitting that paper the same way. So as I'm doing this, I think I want to go ahead and I'm just taking a straight edge because it's easier for me to look at it this way. Do a little line out the side of the bottom of my bucket. And then do the little squigglies, similar to what we did for the ground. Might bring a tan color in again. And lay that underneath that bucket. I can even give my bucket a little shadow here. Drop down one side, give it a little shadow there. And I may even add a few more sprigs where I see fit as I go. I might decide that I want this thing super full and a giant bouquet, and just add some more sprigs of things to it. I think I might want to throw a little more wheat in there just because I think those are cute. And we'll do this side. It's going to come up into that box, and I think that's okay to me. I do kind of like being able to draw over my boxes and work into my boxes because I feel like that makes it almost more interactive than just piling things on top of each other like you would end up doing with a sticker. I'm going to grab another gray because I see some things that I might like to do, like putting my drop shadow under boxes like this. And you can see I'm still just doing a little bit of an L, but I'm not really coming to the corners.